Hello, happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of The Practice. This show is an unrehearsed look into my creative process. I'm Stuart. I'm a 3D artist, illustrator, and your pal, and I'm excited to have you back for another episode, number 220. Rounding out, sort of getting close to the end of the year here, and being that it is the sort of holiday season, I want to continue on this theme of creating sort of holiday assets. Did a little gingerbread man last week, and we're going to try out this holiday wreath today. Here's a little test image that I made, and I've also got some sort of reference imagery pulled up here. Might be able to add another sort of detail or two into this scene. And what I've done actually is I didn't model every component of this. I went ahead and downloaded like a free 3D model of a pine tree. Actually, let's jump into it. I'll show you what I've done here. Now, I wanted to actually link directly to this pack of trees that I downloaded, and for whatever reason, I cannot find the original download link or find where I pulled them from. The fact that they're in Spanish makes it a little harder for me to sort of reverse engineer that find. But what I will say is that you could probably do this technique with a whole lot of different types of images. So let me show you. You know, if you type in pine tree into a website like CG Trader or Turbo Squid, there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff that comes up for free. And a lot of these are going to be just like simple geometry with sort of alpha channeled maps applied to them, which is the same thing that I'm going to be using today. And like I said, unfortunately, I couldn't find the exact, like a link to the exact model that I'm going to be using, but I think this technique will apply to a ton of different models. So here's the model that I'm going to be using today. And as you can see, this happens sometimes with models that you download. Things are a little janky. I'm going to go ahead and just modify some of these textures. And what you can see here is I don't have that alpha channel. So I'm going to drag this image into alpha, turn that on. And now we got a little bit of a pine tree going on here. I'm going to turn on live render viewer. I'm actually going to copy this out of this file. Recent Wreath file, paste that in. I'm going to make a copy of this tree just so we have it. Actually, no, before I do that, let's do this. I want to be using Octane for this final rendering. You can see these are not Octane materials, but what's great is I can just select these two, go to materials, create Octane materials out of these. And I'm just going to select these old ones and delete them. And the preview of the alpha isn't as nice with the Octane, but with the Octane material, but it's going to allow us to get sort of nicer lighting, reflections, and all that good stuff once we get to that point. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab one of these tree limbs, and they seem to all be the same, but it doesn't really matter which I grab. I'm going to grab these polygons, and I'm also going to get in here, and there's this sort of little stem that's made out of real geometry. I want that to grab that guy. Now, app, there's not to have cat. That's fine. Now I'm going to make a copy of this. I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to select the inverse and delete everything out. And now we've got sort of just this one limb. What to do with that is align things here. I'm noticing that geometry isn't lined up quite exactly with sort of the image map here. We can fix that fairly easily. Rotate that guy and get him in position here. Doesn't have to be perfect, but let's try and get it pretty cool. I think lines up pretty well. With that. I also noticed that the UVs might be a little weird on this. Actually looks like we might actually even have intersecting geometry. Gotta check that out. Some doubling up there. Both sides. I'm going to make a copy of this too, in case we want to get it back. But meantime, I'm going to delete one of these layers. So well, that's wildly off center. Parent points to. So I'm going to hit Command A to select everything in polygon mode. Then I'm going to hold Shift and pop over into point mode. And holding Shift is going to maintain my selection. Now I'm just going to hit UI to select everything that isn't attached to these polygons. 2, 0 out the location. I think since we're going to be using a cloner, this next step is going to be fairly important. I need to align handle where I want clones to originate, sort of a thing. Basically, I just want it at the tip of this stem. Yeah, maybe it's worth closing this polygon hole too. Forget it. Let's leave that. That's gonna be fine. Actually, you know what? Let's adjust this angle here too. We can get it sort of standing straight up and down. Looks pretty good. Let's zero that out again. Position and rotation. Okay, so now we've got our limb standing more or less straight up and down. I'm just going to go ahead and throw that in a cloner. And this cloner is going to do most of the work for us. Set it to radial. Jack up the clones. Let's start with like, 40, something like that. Tighten it up. That doesn't look like a very nice wreath yet. One of the things I want to do is I'm just going to make a duplicate of this limb right inside the cloner. I'm just going to scale it up a bit. You'll see what that'll do is alternate between the two. But scaling that up and maybe just modifying it a little bit with this scale tool is going to give us a little bit more variation, size difference, and stuff like that. So this one I'm going to scale up, just kind of make it a taller one. Now we've got a little bit of variation. That's a little better. The other thing we need to do is modify the angle on these. So I want it sort of pointing forward. Imagine how the limbs on a wreath are arranged. They're kind of bent over on top of one another. Sort of like this. Let's figure it out. We'll get it. That's right, phonetically. Got an alpha channel on this image here based on this image of a leaf. Getting there. A little bigger, maybe. Probably we need clones. Thicken it out a little bit. That's pretty good. It's looking kind of uniform though. So with this cloner selected, I'm just gonna start randomizing things a little bit. Vector. That's way too high. A little bit of variation here is going to help us out a lot. Definitely scale as well. I don't want to have uniform scale here. I want to scale across multiple dimensions. That really helps us break things up, get some more variety in there, some more randomness, a little more natural. You can also mess with the rotation a little here. So adding variety, kind of roughing things up and making it look more realistic. DFIC is asking what GPU I'm using. I forget exactly. It's an NVIDIA Quattro. It's something or other. Quattro something or other. I don't know. It's a huge upgrade on my last one. And to be honest, I'm not very computer savvy when it comes to graphic cards and all those different specs and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm not sure why it doesn't actually. And I've tried messing with like some of these material settings, like an editor, larger view, transparency. Yeah, I'm not sure what exactly that's about. And also, if you go to options and turn on transparency, doesn't work either. But the live viewer helps a lot in that regard. Cool. So now we got sort of the foundation of our wreath here, let's call it. I think I actually want to scale these down a little bit. That's feeling a little better. I might add a few more of them. How many do we have? Let's call it 75. Get a little bit thicker. The other thing you could do is if you wanted to have some variety in the types of species that are, or that, you know, like the look of the trees, there's, you could go in and grab, you know, another model. We could do the same thing here. We're gonna apply this to alpha, on the alpha. Let's hurt these materials. Hurt. Delete the old ones. In process, let's just grab a random limb. Maybe somewhere towards the top here where the secondary sort of stick geometry is a little shorter. It's more that alignment kind of issue. Can't really see in here too well, so I'm just going to grab part of the stick and hit UI a bunch of times, which is going to grow the selection. Hit UI and delete it. My little limb. The same technique where I delete the errant layers, errant points rather. Roughly zero this out. Back to our file. Copy our new friend in there. Add it to the cloner. I don't have my position zeroed out well enough. Why that's acting kind of strange. Yep, that's a good idea. I think this asset is going to have a different color palette, a different image map than the ones I've got currently in there. Help us out a bit in terms of variation as well. So let's zero out position and rotation, although I'm not sure that'll make a difference inside the cloner. Off. Well, I don't want quite as much. I don't want quite as much of that. You guys, I'm gonna make a couple copies of the other ones. Right. Not so bad. So let's get in rough background elements and a little bit of lighting. Background, I think I'm gonna sort of put up an imaginary wall that this thing's gonna be hanging on. How is Cycles? You enjoy that? Is it node based? Get a camera in here. Start setting that up. I think I'm going to do, to make the look of these a little bit softer. Maybe I should wait till a little later in the Let's flip those. Turn that map down, say 5%. That'll soften the pine trees, the needles a little bit, allow a little bit of light to pass through them, just give us a little bit more of a realistic look overall. Also probably these glossy materials. Add a little bit of roughness, just a touch. They're pretty, aren't they? Oh, that's good. Decks up a little bit of sort of a reflective quality to them. Pretty good. Now let's get to a few ornaments. Also, lock this dude because I know I'm going to start moving him around all the time. So I'm just going to throw a protection tag on the camera. All right, first things first. Shiny Christmas ball. I'm getting in the habit now of turning render perfect off. Octane doesn't seem to like that all the time. Also, I'm going to get out of my camera, isolate that sphere again. Topper deal, what do we call those things? Little cap sort of thing. Cylinder. Suppose I should go the whole 9 yards and add the little loop too. gonna hand place these ornaments. Probably do an instant glass a little easier. I'm not going to worry about affixing them to individual branches, wood, the real tree. Kind of tuck them here and there. Look will work. Kind of eyeballing it. Make some twinkling lights. That right in this scene. So that'll be pretty close. Quite this much geometry though. Hit 12. Absolutely. Okay. And so what I did was I made this emissive texture to apply to the top of the light bulb. I got used to like luminance being the channel for material-based lighting, cinema's material and lighting engine, but here it's called emissive, which I think is probably the case for most rendering engines. You see, you get all these little dots, which is kind of rough. And by default, emissive textures have a sampling rate of 1. We start cranking that up to like 10 or 30 or 50 or any number of, I've seen people do, numbers in the thousands. That's going to get a finer grain, and the higher that number, sort of the more emphasis the processor will place here, and you'll just get a finer grain or a reduction of noise, let's say. All right, so let's tidy this scene up a little bit. Take these. Oh, where's the? Oh, there it is. Group these. Call them balls. No laughing. You. Alone our lights. Same thing. We're gonna throw those in a radial array. Smaller. I'm not gonna worry about the wire. We're not gonna be photorealistic here. Don't worry about the wire. I'm just gonna float these little lights on in these limbs. Scale down just a little bit again. Pretty small. Turn up the amount. Start with like 25. 35. That's blowing out a ton of lights. I think I need to turn that down a bit. Just turned on surface brightness. I'm not sure exactly what this does, except for it's just sort of like clamps down on the strength of the lighting. Make it a more saturated color as well. Around 30 for now and keep working with it. Also going to turn a little bit darker. Let's bring down the specular and add a bit of roughness too. Kind of make it look more plasticky. We got a cloner. Let's randomize that a little bit. Bar. Start with small values at first. And because we've added all this light with the little twinkle lights in the cloner, I'm going to compensate a little bit and just turn our actual lamps down. Turn our gamma down a little bit. As our exposure, just to darken the thing across the board a little. Saturated with our yellow now. That a little bit. I'm going to turn the sampling rate up to 20 as well. just to increase that. And I believe, looking here, any light in Octane is going to have this sampling rate slider, and you can crank that up to selectively add more quality to different light setups. Very useful. All right, so a lot of our wreath in place here already. What is next? I have some images pulled up. Interesting stuff in here. Pine cones, perhaps. A bow, very common. I like these sticks, little groupings of berries on them and stuff like that. I'm going to try something similar to that. I'm just going to pop open a new file. Cylinder, taller, probably only need to be 12. Cross here. Working kind of quickly here. Clone it. Put a random effector on there. Again, turn the parameters down pretty low. Scale we want to play with. This time I'm going to keep the scale uniform. And the rotation, well, let's add a little. It shouldn't really matter here. Then, color selected. Let's add a push apart. These are really they're intersecting a lot. I think just pushing them apart a little bit is going to give them that sort of clustered look I want. Little clump of berries or something. I'm just going to throw that all inside the cylinder. While I've got the cylinder selected, I want to sort of rough that up a little bit too. I'm going to do editable. KL for my loop cut. Make some cuts randomly along the bottom here. UL again. Loop selection. Now what I would do is just kind of scale and rotate very subtly along the edge of the stick. Break it up a little. Didn't hit UL, I just made our key selection, so I didn't have the back side of that selected. Good. So there's our stick and berries. Copy, paste that into our file. It's obviously massive, big. Here what I'm going to do actually is just borrow one of these bark textures for it. Throw that on. Fine. Grab glossy material. Now these, you could put them in a cloner. So I think I'm just gonna modify them by hand, or place them by hand. Right? Those berries are a little big at the moment. All right, cool. Let's put these in. I should be doing the thing I did for the ornaments is to just use an instance. Mess that up. Let's start now. Pretty good. Let's actually, you know what I can do is I want a little bit of a glow here around these lights. I think we can do that using some bloom. Off up a little. That adds a lot, just having that kind of glare and glow. Yeah, that it almost feels like a crutch sometimes. That bloom really does a lot of good for a lot of different renderings. Gonna add a few more lights here. 50 of them feels all right. And I think I'm gonna add like an idea. Like, watch, this is where I'll get totally sidetracked. I think let's start with an oil tank. It's kind of crazy, but I've got an idea. Is going to be each of the sort of, I don't know, petals. You want to call them petals? I don't know what you call the individual pieces of the pine cone. Thanks DFIC. Own it. Actually, you know what? Probably the best way to do you clone it around an object that's sort of shaped like a pine cone. Let's that. Shaped like papers on one end more than it does on the other. So set this to object, add our here to the object. polygon. Now we're talking. Fortunately, I think I got too many. I wish this was slightly simpler. Another sphere. Fewer subdivisions. Substitute that out. Lunar. Sphere in. And modify it. We get ours. Quick and dirty pine cones go. That's a jumbo pine cone. Crazy how this scaling is. Delete this whole thing. Paste it in. I think something happened when this child and I scaled them down. It's happening again. Probably has something to do with table scaling. Go. just going to make a copy and kind of modify this bark material for the pine cone. Make sort of a dark brown color. Turn down the opacity, image texture. Just have a little bit of, try that out. Yeah, I think it would, Ben. So just getting your comment now. Sounds about right to me. Don't like that warning. You guys still there? Weird. Yeah, I don't know. I think my live streaming software was, I think it was unhappy because we're getting to a sort of a heavy model here with all these clones and everything like that. The lighting and the live rendering preview. I think that was just my computer saying, hey, uh, almost out of memory here. Right. Yeah, for sure. I'm looking at some custom LUTs. This is just the the LUT pack that sort of comes with Octane. There's some nice stuff in there. The way to look at LUTs, I think, is almost like applying an Instagram filter, like in camera. What's cool is you can turn down the strength. So I don't want all of this, but I do like what it's doing for the contrast and the saturation. So I'm going to have about half of that. That looks without. That looks with. And more and more what's really great with Octane is I'm starting to do more of my, color processing right in camera, right in cinema, and I'm spending a little bit less time in Photoshop sort of color correcting and stuff like that. Because I can even go like this and, bump up the saturation or down the saturation depending on what I want. I don't think I want anything here. I think I actually like that where it was. Hot pixel removal is kind of cool too. You can even just like pull back, like if you have here. Let's try this. My saturation is a little too high, or sorry, my exposure is a little too high. I can turn up this highlight compression, which sort of crushes the blown out areas a little bit. That back down. Post processing. No, thin lens. Maybe we add a little bit of depth of field. So I'm going to turn autofocus off. I'm going to select this button here to choose a place to focus on. Like a focal point selection. And I just turn this aperture up. It's not a very deep model. So let's see a ton of this. I think it's having a tough time selecting parts of the model. Zoom in on that more just so you can get a better look at it. I think we need to come down on that depth of field a little bit still. Nice. Right, so that's a fun little exploration, keeping with sort of the holiday spirit. Yeah, I think you can create quite custom results without actually modeling every little bit, which I think is nice to remember sometimes. I think we found a simple free 3D model and sort of bent it to our will a little bit here. Using some selective editing and some cloning, and of course we went in and refined the textures and modified some things here and there and really made it our own. So hope you found it useful. If you did, please share it with a pal, hit that like button, and subscribe for new videos every Tuesday. If there's a subject matter you'd like to see, or if you have any other specific questions about the piece we covered here today, don't hesitate to drop a comment in the comment section below. It would be awesome if you wanted to, support the practice and, contribute on a monthly basis, or just, do a one-time donation and buy me a cup of coffee or something like that. I'd really appreciate that. The social media accounts are all DLGNCE, so hit me up there if you want to keep up with the work that I'm producing. The website is diligence.studio, and this is Stuart saying thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. Really appreciate each and every one of you. Hope you found this useful, and I will see y'all next week.